Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. So this is Madam Atira again, and in this week's lesson we'll learn on how to describe an experience as well as how to tell a story. So this lesson will be very useful to prepare you for your first speaking assessment. Now, the first part of the lesson will be about describing experience. So I'm going to cover a bit of introduction, the content or element that you need when you describe your experience, some of the phrases and vocabulary that are useful, as well as the grammar focus. Okay, so when you describe an experience, usually you will talk about something that has happened to you. So you would like to explain to your friends what had happened to you, who were involved, where did it happen, and what were the events involved. So there are a few things that you need to know in order to describe your experience effectively. So, for example, think of your experience going on a holiday. All right. So, as you can see here, this picture, you have a beautiful picture of an island. I think this is Langkawi Island. All right, so describing an experience means talking about something that has happened in your life. So it is usually a personal experience, something that you felt, something that you saw, as well as something that you did. So the experience can be a happy one, for example, like winning something or meeting someone special. Or it can also be a sad one, for example, like you lost something that is important to you, or a scary one, for example like getting lost or hearing strange noises at night, or a traumatic one like you were involved in an accident or you went through a very hard time in your life, or even an enjoyable one, for example like going on a holiday or celebrating a festival. Now, the content or element that you're going to include when you describe your experience will be about the people who were there with you. So, who was with you? So, was it your family members, like your mother, father, your siblings? So, did you have your friend or teacher or even a stranger that was involved in your experience? So, for example, I went to the beach with my cousin and my best friend. So, your cousin and your best friend are the two main characters in your experience. And the second one is when you talk about the location or the place where the event happened. For example, perhaps it was at your own house or at school, at a mall, at the beach, or on an island. All right. For example, it happened at a shopping mall in Kuala Lumpur. So by letting your listeners know where the event occurred, it will help them to understand you better. And finally, we have the events in order, meaning the events that took place in chronological order. All right, so this will help the listeners to be able to follow your story, to be able to understand what had happened. All right, so usually we'll use chronological. We'll use some of the words or phrases to show the chronological order. Okay, so for example, first we arrive at the park. Then it started raining. After that, we ran to a small hut. Finally, the rain stopped and we saw a rainbow. So you use sequence words to help the listeners to follow the story. All right. So they know what happened first and what happened next. All right. So that will help them to understand you better. Okay, so now we are going to learn some of the vocabulary or phrases that you can use. Okay, so when describing the people that were involved in your story, when mentioning them, you can say something like my friend and I, or I was with my parents, or I was with my cousins, I was with my teacher, or there were many people at the event. Okay, so you let the audience know who are the people, all right, in your story or experience. And the second one is you can describe or you can talk about or mention the place or the location it happened at. For example, it happened at a mall, or it happened at Aeon or KB Mall, or it happened in Johor Bahru. Okay, we went to somewhere. We went to Genting Highland, for example, or the experience took place in a hotel in Cameron Highland. All right. So, for example, we went to Langkawi for a short trip, or it happened during my secondary school year. So this concerns when, right? It happened during my secondary school year. But basically, by giving the context, okay, where it happened, you can also include the time when it happened. All right, it happened last year, it happened 2 years ago, all right, it happened yesterday. Okay, so it gives the context in terms of location as well as the time. All right, and then the events in chronological order. Okay, so you will use sequence words and linking phrases. So first we arrive at then something unexpected happened. After that we decided to, suddenly I heard a noise, and finally everything was okay. Okay, so use sequence words like this. It will help you to arrange the event that had happened nicely in your story. Okay, and you can also include some of the phrases to show your feelings. For example, I felt so happy because, or it was really embarrassing when, or I was scared but also excited, or I'll never forget that day because. So by adding your feelings in your story, it makes your story or your experience more relatable and more engaging to the listeners. They will be able to view the story from your perspective. So you add a personal touch to your story. So it's something that is advisable to do when you share your experience. And the grammar focus, I'm going to cover this quickly. Basically, when you talk about something that had happened in the past and is already finished, you just use simple past tense, okay? So, for example, I went to Langkawi last year. You can't say I go to Langkawi last year. Okay, I went to Langkawi last year. She lost her phone yesterday. They watched a movie last night. So, last year, yesterday, and last night show that the events had happened. Okay, so you have to use past tense. So, just a gentle reminder when you talk about your experience in your speaking assessment one. And also you can use present perfect tense as well. So for present perfect tense, it is something that has happened in the past, but it is still relevant now. Okay. For example, I have eaten nasi lemak today, or she has visited Sabah before. They have never tried durian before, or I have never eaten mutton fried rice before. So usually the time words used are a bit more vague, like there is no definite time. For example, ever or never, already, just, before, today, recently. So you use present perfect tense to describe something that has happened in the past, but somehow there is still consequence or effect of the incident currently or now. Okay. So these are just a list of verbs commonly used to describe experience. So we have the base verb, okay, like go, see, do, have, feel, get, make. And we have the past tense form, the simple past tense form, when, saw, did, had, felt. And you have the past participle form when you combine it with has or have, okay? Okay, so this is an example. Okay, my holiday in Langkawi. So last December, I went on a holiday to Langkawi Island with my family. All right, so the person mentioned that she went to Langkawi with her family. These are the people who were involved in her experience. It was one of the best trips I have ever had. Okay, so she described it as the best trips. We took a flight from Kuala Lumpur and arrived in Langkawi in the afternoon. The weather was hot and sunny. We stayed at a beautiful resort near the beach. The place was clean, quiet, and very relaxing. So notice that the presenter described the weather as hot and sunny. She also described the resort as beautiful, and she described the place as clean, quiet, and very relaxing. So when you are telling your or describing your experience or telling a story, it's a good idea to add adjectives to describe. Okay, you can describe the place, you can describe the weather, you can describe the people. All right, so that will make your story really engaging. Okay, on the first day, we visited the Sky Bridge and took many pictures. The view was amazing. Then we went shopping at the duty-free shops and bought chocolates and souvenirs. At night, we had seafood at a famous restaurant. I really enjoyed the grilled fish. So you look at the phrases on the first day, then, at night. So these words show the sequence of events. So when you are describing your experience, use these words to show the sequence of events. Okay? So you may pause this video and continue read the next paragraph, and you can see there are so many adjectives used to describe. For example, crystal clear water, the sky was orange and pink, and also the use of sequence words to show the chronological order of the events. Okay, and also notice that the writer used simple past tense. For example, the next day we went island hopping rather than we go island hopping. So you have to use simple past tense because you are referring to something that has already happened. Okay, so remember, when you are describing your experience, include the people, the location, and the events that have occurred. Okay, remember to use simple past tense. All right, the easiest way would be to use simple past tense, and remember to use lots of adjectives to describe. All right, you can describe the place, the weather, the people, all right, or the environment or the incident. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can do when you are describing your experience. All right, so moving on to the next part. Well, telling a story, okay, shares some similarities with describing experience. It's just that when you describe an experience, it's more personal, okay? It is something that has happened to you. And when you're telling a story, it can either be something that has happened to you or something that happened to someone else, okay? But some of the elements are actually intercorrelated. They are similar. Some of the elements are quite similar. All right, so again, we're going to cover the introduction, the content or the element, the phrases and vocabulary, as well as the grammar focus. So what does it mean to tell a story? So telling a story means sharing something that happened either in real life or from your imagination. The story can be true, like a memory, or made up, like a creative tale. So when we tell a story, we usually include the people. So in a story, we call them as characters, the place and the time, the setting, the background information or the setting of the story, where and when it happens, and the event. So again, what happened in chronological order, and the feelings, okay, how the characters feel. So these are some of the reasons why we tell stories. So perhaps we tell stories to entertain our friends, or to explain something that happened, or to share an experience, or simply to express our thoughts and emotions. So again, stories can be something that is funny, sad, scary, exciting, but most stories are actually full of lessons. So the first thing is you have to tell a story in order, or the chronological order of a story. So when telling a story, it's important to share the events step by step in the correct order. This helps the listener to understand what happened clearly. So when the listeners understand the chronological order of the event, that will help them to focus on your story. Okay, so it's important to use the relevant phrases. All right, so first you have your background or setting. So this is the beginning of the story. So usually this is the time where you introduce the character, the people who were involved in the story, the characters of the story, as well as the location. All right, so who is in the story or who are in the story or where did it happen? Okay, for example, the story involves my friend Sarah and I, and the story happened at a beach in Terengganu. Okay, so sometimes you want to add a bit of information regarding the weather, the time. For example, it was a hot and sunny afternoon. So the listeners can imagine the setting. They can imagine that oh, it was really hot and sunny when the incident happened, or it was cold with and it was raining cats and dogs, and the clouds were gray in color and it was raining heavily. So then the listeners can imagine the scenario, the situation where the events occurred. Okay, so these will help to set the scene for your story. Now, it is important to use adjectives to describe people, places, weather, and feelings. So, when you want to describe people, these are some of the adjectives that you can use. So, people can be, some people can be kind, they can be helpful, some of them can be scary looking, or brave, or beautiful, or talkative, or quiet. All right, and you can also describe the place. All right, the place can be famous, or beautiful, or noisy, or dark, or crowded, or deserted. Okay, so the opposite of crowded is deserted or isolated. And you can also describe the weather as hot or cold or freezing or stormy or foggy or humid. And you can describe the feelings of the characters. For example, they are worried, they are happy, they are excited, they are surprised, they are proud, they are shocked. So using adjectives will help the readers or the listeners to imagine the scenario, the situation better, and this will definitely help to engage the listeners. So please use lots of adjectives when you describe your experience or tell a story in your first speaking assessment. And then, of course, you're going to have the events that lead to the climax. Now, when you have a story, you start with the setting of the background. All right, you start with the beginning part of the story will be about the setting or the background of the story, the characters, the location, the time, and then you have events. Okay, that happen, sequence of events that happen, and then that will lead to the climax. All right, usually in a story, when you watch a movie or when you read a novel, there will be climax, meaning the most important part of the story. So in order to reach the climax, there will be events that lead to the climax. Okay, so you will, of course, again, you will use like words like first, then, after that, suddenly. Okay, and then you have the climax, which is the most exciting or important part of the story. So the most shocking part of the story, all right? Something big happens, a problem appears, okay? And as for example, suddenly she fell into the river, okay? So that is the most shocking or the most exciting part of the story. Okay, so this is an example. All right, so first the group arrived at the waterfall and unpacked their picnic. Everyone was cheerful, laughing loudly and taking photos together. Then Tina and her cousin climbed the rocks near the edge of the water. They wanted a better view and a cool picture for Instagram. After that, the wind began to blow harder and the sky turned gray. The others started packing up, but Tina stayed on the rocks, smiling at her phone. Suddenly, heavy rain poured down and the rocks became slippery. Tina lost her balance and screamed as she almost fell. So you can see the sequence of events that lead to the climax of this story. Okay, so the resolution is after the climax, what happened? Okay, so her cousin grabbed her hand just in time. Tina's heart was racing and her hands were shaking. So that was the scariest moment for Tina. That was the scariest moment for Tina. Okay, so that is the resolution. All right. How does the story end? Okay, so you have your background or the setting of the story, and then you have your event, something that happened, And then you have your climax, the most important part of the story, and then you have your resolution. Okay, so the ending of the story. You are heading towards the end of the story. And finally, in the end, they laugh, and she will never forget the day. She also learns to be more careful, right? So sometimes you might want to include some of the moral values, something that we can learn from a story. Okay, so this is an example. I would like you to read this. You can pause the video and read this. So this is an example of a story that contains the background information such as the characters, the setting of time and place, and the sequence of events that had happened, the climax, the resolution, as well as the moral of the stories. Okay, so please pause this video and read this story. But I would like you to focus on the use of past tense throughout this story. For example, it was a cold and rainy day. Okay, and then 5 students from SMK Sri Wawasan were chosen, and on the second night they were told. All right, so these are all past tense. So remember to use past tense in your story. And the second one, okay, remember to describe, all right, describe, to put lots of or to use a lot of adjectives in your story. For example, what is the setting of the environment or the atmosphere? So it was a cold rainy evening. When did this story happen? It's during the school holidays. Okay, who were the characters? We have Nina, Amir, Fatin, Shafi, and Lisa. So what happened? There was sequence of events. Okay, so these are some of the elements that you need to include in your story. Okay, so please pause the video and I would like you to read the story. So this will give you an example on how to tell a story to the listeners. Okay. All right, now these are some of the tips on how to deliver fluent, engaging, and interesting presentation. Because in your first speaking assessment, you're going to record your presentation. Okay, either you want to describe an experience or tell a story. So first of all, it is important to speak clearly and fluently. All right, just use simple and correct grammar. Okay, try not to have too many pauses. Okay, like or not too many of them, and then speak at a steady pace, not too fast and not too slow, and practice and practice and practice saying your ideas in full sentences. Okay, and then use voice effectively. So if you notice in this video, I try to use my voice effectively. Sometimes I sound a bit excited, sometimes I sound a bit monotonous. It depends on what I'm trying to convey. So stress certain words, okay, stress important words so that the listeners will be notified on the important elements in your presentation. Okay, and then use gestures and body language. I know because this is a recording, perhaps you might not be able to see my body language very much, but no, don't be too static, or don't be too monotonous when you are presenting. So use your hands to support your message. Try to look at the camera, move a little but not too much. And then it's important to organize your story clearly. Okay, so that's why you have sequence words. First, next, after that. Okay, so this will help the audience to follow your ideas easily. And most importantly, you have to practice, 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 and practice. Okay, so the more practice you do, the more fluent and confident you will become. So you can record your own practice session, or you can practice in front of the mirror. So I think for your first speaking assessment, please do not read your story or experience from a script. Okay, try to present spontaneously. Pretend that you are telling a story or describing an experience to a friend. Okay, so you might want to practice first. And then when you are confident enough, you can record your speaking session. And inshallah, that will help you to get better marks. So I hope this video is very useful or beneficial in preparing you for your first speaking assessment. I would like to wish you all the best, okay? And good luck in your first speaking assessment. That is all from me, Madam Atira. Thank you and have a nice day. Assalamualaikum.